Hello, this is Chef John from foodwishes.com with sausage and sweet corn muffins. That's right, all these years you've been eating corn muffins without meat, like some kind of hapless vegan. But don't feel bad, you're still relatively young. So with the help of this video, hopefully you can make up for some lost time. And by the way, before we get started, I will admit this was an experiment, which usually means there are things I would change if I made it again. But besides probably using the wrong kind of sausage, this really did come out quite well. But anyway, we'll talk more about that later. But for now, let's go ahead and get started by cooking the aforementioned possibly wrong kind of sausage. So in a pan set over medium-high heat with a little bit of olive oil in it, I'm going to add some spicy Italian sausage, which for me was 2 large links that I removed from the casing. And all we need to do here is cook this while we break it up with a spatula. And we'll keep doing that until 2 things happen. We've broken that sausage up into some nice small crumbles, and it's pretty much cooked through, which is basically what I had right here. And at that point, we'll stop and add some diced red bell pepper, and we'll mix that in. And then we'll cook that for about 2 minutes, just to sort of take the raw edge off. And of course, just because I'm using sweet bell peppers doesn't mean you can't use hot peppers. You are, after all, the McLovin of how to be stuffing your muffin. So if I wasn't using a spicy sausage, I might go with a hot pepper here. But anyway, like I said, we'll cook that for a couple minutes, just to soften and sweeten those peppers a bit. And at that point, we can turn off the heat because this step is pretty much done. Except for one optional but recommended step. You're probably going to have a good amount of rendered fat in the pan, which you may want to drain. And as you know, how I usually like to do it is with a paper towel, and use that to sort of wick and blot up that grease, which I think works pretty good, and you don't have to get a strainer all greasy. So you go ahead and remove as much fat as you want, which could be all of it. But as you know, fat is flavor, so I might soak up a little more, but I ended up leaving about a tablespoon. And then all we need to do is set that aside and let it cool while we move on to the dry ingredients. So in a mixing bowl, we'll start with some white all-purpose flour, as well as an equal amount of cornmeal. And then we're also going to need a little touch of baking soda. No, not baking powder. Don't get confused. Baking soda. And then usually we'd add a little bit of cayenne here, but because we're using such a spicy sausage, we don't need any. So let's add a little anyway. And then we'll grab a whisk and give that a thorough mixing to combine those ingredients. Since nobody sifts anymore. I mean, maybe your grandma does, but most people don't. So we will give that a mix and set that aside while we move on to the wet ingredients. And there's just 2. We are going to do a couple large eggs, to which we will add some buttermilk. And then as soon as we take a whisk and give that a mix, we'll move on to final production, which is basically just combining everything together. So let's pour our wet ingredients into our bowl of dry. You know the old saying, always add wet to dry, and vice versa. And then besides our wet and dry ingredients, we're also going to want some chopped green onions, as well as a little bit of sharp cheddar cheese, which, by the way, I grated myself by hand, mostly because I'm not a huge fan of cellulose-coated food. And then, of course, because we're making fresh corn muffins, we need some fresh corn. So I'm going to toss in 1 cup of very sweet white corn kernels. And then by now, our sausage mixture should be room temp. So we'll add that. And then last but not least, we will finish our batter with butter. So let's pour in a 1/4 cup of melted butter. And we'll grab a spatula and give this a mix. And generally with this kind of thing, people are terrified about overmixing. Ooh, overmixing. But here you can relax. We're stuffing this corn muffin with so many goodies. It's going to be tender and delicious no matter how long you mix it. But having said that, why mix something longer than you have to? So all we want to do is keep mixing and stirring and kind of folding until the flour disappears. So that's looking just about perfect right there. And at that point, we'll stop and move on to making muffins. And for that, of course, you're going to need a muffin pan, which, as you can see, has been lined with these parchment muffin cups. And by the way, please try to find these natural colored ones. I hate those pink, yellow, and blue ones. So please don't use them. But anyway, once our pan is lined, we'll go ahead and transfer that batter in, using a spoon or maybe an ice cream scoop like I'm doing here, which I find is the easiest and least messy way. And then once we've successfully transferred that batter evenly into those 12 cups, our muffins are pretty much ready for the oven, except I do like to top it with a little more shredded cheddar. And not too much, just a few shreds here and there. And then once that's set, we can go ahead and transfer this into the center of a 375-degree oven for about 25 to 30 minutes, or until they're a beautiful golden brown and look something like this. Check it out, those look pretty good. And if I had to guess, I'd say they were done. But there's no money in guessing. So we will want to test this with a bamboo skewer or toothpick. And if you stick that in, it should come out clean. If you pull that out and see some raw batter on it, you'll need to put your muffins back in for a few minutes. But that's okay. That's just you cooking. And then assuming they have cooked long enough, We do want to let these cool down a little before we try to eat them. Okay, at least a few minutes. Personally, I think something like this is much better warm than it is piping hot. So I did let mine cool down to just barely warm before going in for the official taste, which I was very excited for because these look so gorgeous. But if I'm being completely honest, they were not amazing. I mean, they could have been amazing, but I used the wrong sausage. That spicy, intensely flavored Italian sausage was just too strong for the rest of the ingredients. I'm thinking this would have been better with something mild like a breakfast sausage, which has those warmer, sweeter spices which I think would have worked better with the corn. So while it looked gorgeous, and the texture was very nice, my choice of spicy Italian sausage did not elevate this to where it should have been. So was I discouraged? No, not at all. In fact, the opposite. I really do think if these were done with a milder, sweeter sausage, they would make an incredible brunch or breakfast treat. Maybe even split and toasted and topped with poached eggs. Oh yeah, that's an idea. But anyway, that's it. What I'm calling sausage and sweet corn muffins. This turned out to be one of those rare recipes that was both a catastrophic failure and a stunning success. So I really do hope you give this a try soon. Head over to foodwishes.com for all the ingredient amounts and more info as usual. And as always, enjoy.